I've dealt with more paranormal encounters than most people hear about in a lifetime. It's part of the job, though a job I'm not proud of. Investigating haunted places, cursed homes, and the occasional exorcism, it wears you down. After years of facing things no one should, I needed a break. I just wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere normal for a while. That's how I ended up renting a small house near Elmwood Lane, unaware that it would be my worst encounter yet. I didn't know the place had a reputation, not at first. Neighbors avoided the subject. You'd mention the street in passing, and their faces would turn cold. At night, the area was dead silent. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, though. Something darker, heavier, like the air was waiting for something, but I pushed it aside, convincing myself it was nothing. I had dealt with worse, or so I thought. My first encounter happened about a week after I moved in. It was just past 3 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of faint footsteps outside my window. At first, I thought it was a stray animal, or maybe a lost traveler. But as I listened closer, I realized those steps were too steady, too deliberate. I looked out, expecting to see someone walking by, but there was nothing. Just an empty street under a thick blanket of fog. I've dealt with spirits before. The uneasy feeling in my gut told me this wasn't just my imagination. I tried to ignore it, but each night the footsteps came back, growing louder, closer. And every night I felt a chill run down my spine, like something or someone was getting nearer. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The fog was thicker than ever, swirling unnaturally. As soon as I set foot on Elmwood Lane, everything went silent. No wind, no distant traffic. Not even my own footsteps seemed to make a sound. But that's when I heard it. The footsteps behind me. Soft at first, like someone tiptoeing. They weren't mine. My heart raced. I turned around, but the street was empty. The sound grew louder, faster. They were right behind me. I turned again, and in that moment, the temperature dropped so fast, my breath clouded the air. I couldn't see anyone, but I knew I wasn't alone. I didn't run. Running would make it worse. Instead, I slowly backed away toward my house. When I finally made it to my front door, the footsteps stopped. But then, something else started. Scratching. Soft at first, then more frantic, like nails scraping against the walls of the house. I knew the signs. This wasn't just a haunting. Something far worse was lurking. I couldn't sleep that night. The scratching continued for hours, only to stop just before sunrise. The next day, I asked around, trying to piece together the history of Elmwood Lane. No one wanted to talk. I finally cornered an old man who lived at the edge of town. His voice trembled as he told me about Elias Blackwood, the undertaker who used to live there. Blackwood wasn't just an ordinary undertaker. He dabbled in dark rituals, using the bodies of the deceased to trap their souls. People said the houses on the street were cursed because of him. Residents started hearing voices, seeing shadows out of the corner of their eye until they either went mad or disappeared entirely. No one knew exactly what happened to Blackwood, but they say he's still there, watching, waiting. That night, I stayed inside, determined to leave the town the next morning. But the street had other plans for me. The fog rolled in thicker than ever, and by 3 a.m. the footsteps had returned. This time, I felt something cold brush against the back of my neck. I froze, my body paralyzed with fear. Then I heard it, a voice, faint, whispering in my ear, "Join us." I turned around, and for the first time, I saw them. Figures barely visible through the fog, their faces twisted in agony, eyes hollow. They reached for me, their whispers growing louder, desperate. My instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The fog began to swirl around me, pulling me toward the center of the street. In my years of dealing with the paranormal, I had never felt fear like this. This wasn't something I could fight or cleanse. This was something ancient, something evil. I was trapped. But then, as if by some miracle, the fog began to lift. The figures vanished. The air warmed, and I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. I don't know why it let me go, but I was the only one to ever make it out alive. I packed my things and left that very morning. To this day, I don't know what I experienced on Elmwood Lane, or why I was spared when so many others weren't. But one thing is clear, it's still out there, waiting for the next unlucky soul to set foot on that cursed street.